discussion. Discussion is one of the 4 Ds. I had a situation when I was about 19 years old. I was appointed as this deacon, like a ministerial servant, right? So in my congregation, my job was to oversee the distribution of the Bibles and books and things like that. And so I was assigned an assistant, and the assistant was older than me. So I was a young man to receive my assignment, and I considered it a privilege. And my assistant was a little bit older than me, and as we got moving over the months, I started to hear rumblings that he was talking about me behind my back, and he was saying things about I don't do a good enough job at my job, essentially. So apparently he had some grievances as my assistant, but he had not spoken to me about these grievances. He had simply just gone and sort of talked to other people about these things. So certainly I could recognize this wasn't the proper way to handle the situation. And it was time for me to decide how I would address this man talking about me behind my back. And so I felt that the best way that I could pursue peace and unity is to go ahead and confront him about some of the things he's been saying, but to do so in a peaceful manner. And so there I was, 19 years old. I looked the man in the eye and said, I have to change his name just to protect the innocent here. But I said, George, could I talk to you for a second? And he said, sure. And we went off into a private area. He said, how's everything going, George? Is everything okay? Is there anything that you feel like you need to talk to me about? Is there anything that you feel like I've done wrong? And he was, no, no, everything's fine. And then I said, I've heard that some people have mentioned that you were saying things. And then he explained where he was coming from, what his grievances were, and he kind of opened up about his thoughts on the matter. And I expressed my thoughts calmly and the way that I felt about it and asked if there was anything else he had to say. And he said no. And I gave my opinion of how we should move forward, being that it was my position to make that decision. And the thing I remember about the discussion is not the details of what we talked about. The thing I remember about the discussion that stood out to me was when we were done, he says to me, can I have a hug? So, so there we were, two grown men giving each other a hug after having a conversation. And I thought this was very sweet. It showed that he had a soft heart beneath this talking behind your back type of guy that I had taken him as. Um, but it also indicated to me that I had handled the situation in a way that was productive. Because if at the end of the discussion he felt like, hey, let's embrace, then that's probably the ideal outcome that I would have wanted from that occasion. Especially to go from him talking about me feeling like maybe we're enemies, maybe he doesn't like me, to now we're friends and we're hugging. And so what I employed in that situation was the skill of discussion. So what we're going to be talking about here over the next 4 weeks is the 4 Ds, the 4 Ds of the healed response. So you hear a lot about trauma response because all of the research in the field has uncovered the 4 Fs of the trauma response. But what you never hear about is how are we supposed to be responding to difficult situations in life? So the 4 Fs, the trauma responses are fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. It's good to know what those are: fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. When you memorize those, then you can better identify when you are going into a trauma response, right? And what happens with those who have unhealed trauma is they're continuing to respond to situations in these four F's. So it will be everyday situations, not emergencies, but they're still going into fight or flight or freeze or fawn. And in reality, because they're trauma responses, we should only be using them under dramatic life or death circumstances, like there's a literal bear right there, or someone has a gun pointed at you, or you're going to die in the next few moments if you don't do something. Those are the times that the four F's will work well for us. They're adaptive in those moments. But what happens when we start using the four F's in our relationships, for fight, flight, freezing, and fawning? It's unhealthy. If we're using the four F's at work to handle situations, not ideal. And friend groups to handle situations, not ideal. Your personal business, your finances, not ideal, right? So we're not going to get good results if we continue to live in stress response and trauma response. So we have to learn how to take on difficult, challenging, stressful situations without engaging the four F's. So the four D's are what we want to engage in instead. And your four D's are discussion, disconnection, deliberation, and deference. So we're going to break these down one at a time. So tonight we're talking about discussion. Those four D's again are discussion, disconnection, deliberation, and deference. So let's talk about this one discussion that you saw me employ when I talked to George about the situation. And I was a young man, but I had a certain amount of maturity about me. And the way that I handled the situation was not in stress response. It was not in trauma response. And that's why we got a good result. And so all of us can use to learn the skills so that we too can get good results. And I can't promise people are going to give you a hug. They just have to be as sweet and cuddly inside as George was. But I can promise that you will stop sabotaging your life when you learn to respond in the four D's. So tonight we're talking about discussion. So how do we respond according to discussion? Discussion is like a lesser version of the fight response. So the fight response is that full-blown stress trauma response. But if you take it down a few notches, instead of fight, you would go into discussion. This is a calmer, more balanced response that we should be using on an everyday basis with our everyday problems and issues that arise. But you need skills to know how to employ discussion. You would have learned some of these skills if you had parents that dignified you, that didn't neglect your development. If you grew up in an environment that wasn't chaotic and unpredictable, if you weren't constantly scared and stressed as a child, then you would have been able to learn the skills of discussion as a child. If your parents listened to what you said, if they validated you, if they constructively corrected you to help you to build your voice and your vocabulary, then you would have learned the skills of discussion. If you would have had parents that were reasonable, then you would have learned that everything in life is a negotiation. Everything in life is a negotiation. And so almost everything's negotiable at some level. But you need skills to negotiate. And you can't build those skills when you're hiding for your life, when you're fighting for your life. And some of us grew up in environments like that, that were unpredictable, that were chaotic, where we're fighting for our life. We're just trying to survive it. And parents that are very harsh. Okay, so first of all, forgive yourself if you have the tendency to respond in the four F's now. But this is where we learn right here, right now. This is where we learn. We're going to reparent ourselves right here, right now to learn how to respond with the skills of discussion. So you have the fight response, which is a common one that many people would have gone into, or the flight response. In my situation, someone's talking about you behind your back in church and it's getting around. And it's like, so the fight response would be for you to snap. You would maybe hold it in, hold it in, hold it in. And then one day they say something at the wrong time and you just, boom, and you just say all this stuff, right? Or you're backbiting. So you go behind his back and you start talking about him to everybody, right? Or you try to go tell on him, try to go tell the authorities about him, right? So all of that is examples of possible fight responses, how that could look. Or you're going to flight response, which is probably even more common. Just avoid, 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 right? So I don't want to talk to him about it. I'm not going to talk to him about it. I'm not going to talk. And then what happens? We become passive aggressive, right? Which is that fight, flight. It's there's no positive skills employed with passive aggression. You're just putting in little jabs. That is not productive. It's not productive, right? So instead of that, that's fight and flight response. We use the skills of the 4Ds, the skills of discussion. So how do we use the skills of discussion? Well, let me go over some principles with you that will help you to develop those skills now. One of the principles is to pick your battles. One of the principles is to pick your battles. That means everything that happens to you is not a time to employ your skills of discussion. Okay. Not everything that happens is time to go and say, okay, we got to sit down. We got to talk about this. Not everything. So you're going to identify, is this something I can live with and just let it go? Or is this something I need to address because I'm not going to be able to live with this for the duration of this relationship? You see how that's going to depend in every situation? Sometimes you just are assigned to a partner, but it's just for the day. And so they annoy you. But since it's only for the day, it's kind of not worth like trying to have a whole discussion with them about why they annoy you, because you just say, I could live with this for the day. The duration of the relationship is such that I don't need to address this, right? But then sometimes we're locked with a person for life, like a marriage mate or a child or a parent. And it's like, oh man, or a boss or something like that for long-term relationships. And we ask ourselves, can I live with this? And we're like, no. Once you realize it's not something you can live with, then it would be time to employ the skills of discussion. So be sure to pick your battles. The methods that you can use for discussing something, which is to have a back and forth to communicate about it in a calm, even tone manner. To have a discussion, you can speak face to face with the person. You can speak with them on the telephone. We have video chat now available. You can use old-fashioned writing letters. Sometimes it's actually better to write a letter when we're dealing with documenting things for work, court, right? So if you're going up to higher ups, good time to put it in writing, to write it in a letter rather than addressing it in person, because then you have record of what they said and what you said, right? And then you can't be gaslit, and there can't be the he said, she said, and all that. It's there, it's recorded. I said this, then they wrote back this. So sometimes it's better to address things in a letter, even with a marriage mate, to say, you know what, we're having trouble finding each other on this. Let me write you an email, and then you respond to that. And let's do it like that. So we're not fighting, right? And so now you're able to actually take the time and think out what you want to say it, and then they're able to do the same, going back to you. And that brings us to deliberation, which is one of the 4Ds as well. All discussion is tempered by deliberation. Your deliberation allows you to analyze, to think, to meditate on what you're going to say and how you're going to say it. So with discussion comes deliberation. Now you have to pick your battles and you have to pick your medium. So you can discuss face to face, but sometimes writing letters, telephone is appropriate as well. Now, here's what you always want to do in a discussion. You want to stick to the point. Stick to the point. I repeat, in every discussion, you must stick to the point. This is one of the most important skills to practice. If someone comes to you to discuss something, then you're going to stick to his or her point until it's solved. You're not going to bring in what they didn't do for you and how it's not fair that they're bringing this up and how yesterday they didn't take out the garbage and they never go on bike rides with you and they're not good. You have to stick to the point of the discussion. They initiated the discussion, so we get to talk about what it is that they want to talk about. Same rule applies in reverse. If you initiate the discussion, then you must demand that you stick to the point. This is when you're talking to anyone from your boss to your coworker to your marriage mate. Okay? It is appropriate to bring a pen and some paper, especially when you're dealing with your marriage mate. You're going to need this. This helps you to stick to the point. Okay? So what are you going to put on here? Right at the top of the page, you put the point of the discussion. I'm not joking. Right at the top of the page, you need the point of the discussion. You know why? Because you're going to forget once they start hitting you, okay? Because they're going to take it as their job to get you off the point because it's uncomfortable for them. They don't like that you're coming to them with something they're doing wrong. So they're going to hit you with the, well, what about this? And well, what about that? And well, what, right? And so you want to be able to stick to the point. And the point is going to be at the top of the page. So you can always look back down, see it at the top of the page. And what you say to them is, thank you so much for bringing that up. That sounds very important. We can address it at another time. In fact, I'll even write it down so we can remember to talk about it. For now, though, I want to stick to the point of this discussion. And then reiterate the point until you drive all the way to the solution of the discussion. Do not switch points. Do not defend. Use the skills of evading an argument, the skills of assertiveness. This is the EAR technique. If you want to learn more about how to evade an argument and how to assert yourself, you can do so by going to my YouTube, typing in Roman Zanoni evade, Roman Zanoni skills of assertiveness. You can also learn about that technique in the book, available on Amazon. It's called Mind. And it teaches you how you can, it's got the breakdown right there in black and white for how you can use the skills of assertiveness and evade an argument. You need these skills, these techniques, so that you're not afraid to address matters that really matter to you, the things that are important to you. When we're expressing ourselves, we need to avoid emotionalism. Emotionalism is construing a point with our emotions or speaking directly from the emotions. For instance, if the real point, the way to avoid emotionalism is to say something like straight fact, like Henry asked me to join him. It's a direct fact. He asked you, what did he say? He said, can you join me? Straight fact, right? When we speak in facts, then it's not as easy to argue with us. And we don't have to apologize later. When we speak in emotionalisms, we might say something like, Henry tried to get me to take his side. The reason that's an emotionalism is because we're saying now that we can read his mind or his intention. Oh, he's just trying to do this. They don't care. So-and-so clearly doesn't care. Such and such clearly lacks empathy. Can you hear the emotionalisms in my voice? It has been totally impossible to speak to such and such. When we try to address something in a discussion, we're trying to solve a problem. We're going to create a bigger problem, or we're going to seem like a problem ourselves if we discredit ourselves with emotionalism. There's no room for emotion in discussion. Sorry, until you do the hug at the end. The discussion needs to be intellectual, scientific. You need to go in and stick to the point. So if you're in the listening seat because they're the ones with the point, then you're going, okay, interesting. You're writing it down. Okay, okay. And one of the reasons I'm writing while they're talking is so that I don't interject and interrupt them. That's a no-no in discussion. Never interrupt. When you do interrupt, apologize because it's impulsive, right? We all do it. But when you do interrupt, back up, apologize, give them a chance, let them finish, right? And try to write down what the next thing is that you're going to say so that you're not interrupting them. Okay. But we're avoiding the emotionalisms. When we talk as well, we want to avoid extreme speaking, which we talked about in our cognitive distortion discussion. We want to use instead qualifiers. Uh, Qualifiers are words that are used to soften our speech, to make it more accurate instead of extreme. For instance, a few times I've asked for help and not received it, rather than, you never help when I ask. Can you see the difference in those statements? I'll give it to you again. A few times I've asked for help and not received it, instead of, you never help me when I ask. You see the problem with the second statement? I'm communicating the same thing, but in the second statement, I got emotionalism, I got extreme speaking. I'm using the word never, that's extreme speech. Never, always, all that is extreme. When you speak extreme, you're discrediting yourself. You discredit your argument because you're not speaking in direct fact. So make sure you qualify and make your statements more accurate by saying a few times, to be accurate, a few times I've asked and I didn't receive it. I see, I even took the blame off of that person. I just said that I asked and I didn't receive, not that they failed, right? So qualifying your statement, using the qualifiers is going to be very helpful to make you more effective in your use of discussion, in your discussion skills. One of the main principles you want to remember is to take your time. People get caught up all the time in a rhythm. They think that discussions have a rhythm. So you talk, then I talk, then you talk, then I talk, and you talk, then I talk. And when you say this, then I say this. Stop. It's not a rhythm, and it's not a call and response. Okay. We're not making music. Stop. Let them speak. And after they're done, let some silence in. Let some silence just hang. Get it off rhythm. Throw the rhythm off. Let it be awkward for a minute while you think. This is what thinking looks like. You see how my lips aren't moving and there's no sound coming out of my mouth while I'm thinking? That is beautiful. Why is it beautiful? When you slow things down, you apply the rule of 7 seconds. What does it do for the other party? It shifts the energy in the room and makes it so that you're not easily controlled. You see, if you're stuck in a call and response and I just say whatever I want and you have to now respond to me, I'm just controlling you like a puppet. Don't do that. Don't let the other person control you in the conversation ever. You don't have to respond. Not right away. Just take your time. Think before you speak. Shifts the energy in the room. A lot of times people rehear what they just said when you pause. And you don't have to tell them what they said was wrong. Maybe they say, well, I didn't think this would fit for somebody of your size. And then you just pause, silent. And then they go, I mean, I didn't mean, I'm not trying to say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Let me take that back. And you said nothing. And they're backtracking on their statement. Why does that happen? Because you were shutty. You shut the mouth, You let the energy shift. And when the energy shifted, what they did was they threw the ball at you, but it bounced back at them because of some type of physics or something. And they're like, oh, whoa, I threw that ball kind of hard. Let me pause. Hold on. Let me try to get this right. Right. So pause. It's good for the other party because then they get to hear the ridiculous things that just came out of their mouth, perhaps. But it's even better for you when you pause. This is rule of 7 seconds that you're going to wait at least 5 to 7 seconds before saying anything in response to anything. That's of importance. That 7 seconds allows you to speak from here and not from here. Trauma response is going to be fight. You're going to defend or you're going to offend with this back here. Trauma response is fight. 5 to 7 seconds, your cerebral cortex boots up like an old computer. Your cerebral cortex comes online. Oh, who awakened me from my slumber? And then you go, wise cerebral cortex, what do you have for me? And what comes out 7 seconds later? Woo! So much better than what would have came out in 1/12 of a second, because that's how fast the amygdala responds. Don't respond in your amygdala. Stop it. In order to not respond in your amygdala, what do? Because Roman, it's automatic. You shutty. You shutty. Close this like that. Keep your lips closed and pause, think, and allow the uncomfortable silence to hit. When the silence washes over. And then as you're thinking, your responses start getting wiser and wiser and wiser. And then you come back and guess what? It's fine. You have not broken the law. It's only been 5 to 7 seconds. Sometimes you'll go a little more and that's fine. Sometimes they say, hey, are you still in there? What's going on? Why aren't you responding? What should you do? You just hit them with one of these. Just one of these. 1 second. You can tell them, I'm thinking, hold on. And then they know, like, okay, he's thinking. This is interesting. Rarely see people do that these days. And they sit back and they wait for the response. They know it's going to be something good. And it always is. It always is so much better to pause. By the way, when we talk about slowing things down, don't be afraid to take hours, even days, to respond to something that's important. Don't be afraid to tell someone, you know what? You've given me something to think about. Let me get back with you as soon as I can. So let that pause be whatever it needs to be for you to always respond in the higher mind. Remember, everything you say is written in ink. Can't really take it back. You can say, I take that back, but that's like scribbles on the page. We can all still see it. We all know what you initially said, right? You can't get it back. So don't put it out there in the first place. That's why God gave you a container. This container right here is to hold all the stuff that you don't want out there. So keep it in the container. Making sense? Take your time. You should always avoid promising something without deliberation. That's your meditation and thinking time. So don't just, okay, yeah, I'll do that. Oh, sure. Oh, okay, you're right. Don't agree. Don't agree too fast. Pause, think. Let people know you got to get back to them. You say, okay, thanks so much, boss. I appreciate you talking to me about this. I see where you're at on this situation. Let me think about this and I'll get back to you. That's all you got to say. That's all you got to say. You don't have to have all the answers up front. And it's okay to end on a disagreement because you're doing it peacefully. You say, okay, I got this all organized here. So it looks like you're here and this is how you're feeling. And I'm here and this is how I'm feeling. So it doesn't look like we're reaching a reconciliation at the moment. So why don't we leave things here for the time being, agree to disagree, and we can always come back and revisit this at another time. Sometimes that's what it has to be. Sometimes that's what it has to be. So keep it organized. Stay on the point. Know what it is you're working on. Know what you're doing. Don't blame anyone and don't take any blame. Don't blame and don't take the blame. Don't blame and don't take the blame. Okay? Takes balance to do discussion right. So I'm not going to tell them, well, if you hadn't, it's your fault because you didn't and you. Don't blame. Don't blame. We have a situation here. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on how we could solve it. That's it. It's a situation. You got to solve it. No need to blame. It doesn't matter whose fault it is. And when they try to put the shift back on you and they try to blame it to you, don't take that either. Don't take that either. And I'm saying internally, you don't have to argue verbally, but don't take it inside yourself and don't come out and say, "Oh, you're right. This is my fault." No, no, that's fawn response. We don't do that anymore. It's all my fault. Yeah, okay, I'll just agree to everything to keep the peace. No, that's not skills of discussion. Just write it down. Okay, so you're saying that it's my fault that all the employees left. Okay, right, right. Because I'm mean. Okay, got it, got it, got it. Is there anything else, right? I'm not going to take the blame. I'm just understanding his point. Okay, okay. Thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you for sharing that. You understand? And then you can go on with discussion. I don't need to say, oh, all right, okay, I guess you're right. No, no, no. That's not necessary. Nobody needs to be blamed in the situation. What we need to do is figure out the solution. And so if you're forgetting what you're supposed to be doing, go back to the top of that page and look at the point. What is the point here? What are we trying to discuss? You should always go into a discussion with an idea of what you would like to walk away with, because everything is a negotiation. With that being the case, remember that your negotiation can be win-win. In fact, it should be. A good negotiator is not one who takes everything for themselves. They want a win-win scenario. So that's what you're seeking in your negotiation is, how can you get what you need and I get what I need? That would be ideal. So when you want to have a discussion with someone, set an appointment, always. With your mate too? Yes. With your spouse, boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, especially. Set an appointment. Stop trying to have discussions in the moment. This is where we always get in fights. We're in the car and we go, I feel like you don't pay enough attention to me. I feel like you're not with me. You're not. Ugh, bad timing. You're in the kitchen. Are you going to help me with this? Ugh, bad timing. If you want to discuss a real issue, it's better to say, hey, I need to talk to you about something. You say, hey, I need to talk to you about something. When can we talk? Can we talk tonight and set the appointment at the soonest available option? Always as soon as possible, but never in the moment. So even if it's like, yeah, we can discuss right now. Okay, yeah, give me 5 minutes. Let me get, and you understand? It's always an appointment because you're going to show up with your notebook and a pen, even in the family, especially in the family. This is how we keep things organized. We keep it together. We don't get gaslit. We don't get into arguments. We don't get into fights. We don't defend ourselves. We don't blame people. We're getting to the solution of the issue. Just sitting down, getting to the solution of the issue. That's the point. When they say they want to talk, cool, go grab your notebook. But set an appointment. Most of the time, people don't want to use the skills of discussion because they live in fear. And that's what drives us to fight and flight and freeze responses. We live in fear. We're scared and fawn responses. We live in fear, right? But are we supposed to be living in fear? Is that the purpose of your life? To cower? To be afraid? No, you were made to be courageous. Courageous. A courageous person still has fear, don't they? But they move forward despite the fear. So be courageous. You can feel the fear, but do it anyway. So are you going to be nervous when you have to talk to someone? Yeah, of course. Of course you are. You're going to feel it all in your chest. As soon as someone says to you, hey, can we talk? You're already, right? That's just natural. That's just that anyone could say to you, if you care about them and they say to you, can we talk? You don't even have to care. When someone says to you, can I talk to you? You're already feeling it in your chest, right? But feel the fear and do it anyway. Feel the fear and do it anyway. Stick to these skills. These are the skills of discussion. These are the skills of discussion. You can consult fear, meaning you check in with it. What am I fearing? Why am I fearing? But you never allow fear to guide you, to lead you. You don't allow fear to be the boss of you. Fear works for you. It's your security detail. That's what fear is. It works for you like a bodyguard. So it's someone you consult with. I don't think you should go there, sir, ma'am. I don't think you should do such a. Okay, thank you so much. Look, I'm going to do it anyway, so I need you to stick next to me and keep me safe in case there's a real emergency. I'm going to need you, fear. Okay. It's going to follow you, right? When we think that the fear is the boss, then our life goes down, down, down. Imagine a famous celebrity who has so much potential starts thinking that their security detail is the boss of them. Then they never go anywhere. They never go out. They don't go to any functions because the security is always going to advise against it. You shouldn't go to that awards show. You shouldn't go for that. You shouldn't go do that. Next thing you know, they would plummet. And that's what's happening to us when we're in trauma response. We're in fear all the time. We're driven by fear. And it's the same thing for anger. So what happens because people live in fear, they need the anger to take the action because they're so scared to have a discussion. So they wait until they get angry. You ever do that? You use anger as your motivation to finally, you know what? I'm done with this relationship. Yeah. You ever do that? Don't do that. No more. No more. Fear, anger. You don't allow anger to drive you. Anger is not the driver. Anger is not the driver. You don't allow anger to guide you in your life. You don't bring anger to the discussion. You can't discuss anything when you're angry. So that's an automatic, hey, can we talk? If you're angry at the moment, it's a no, not right now. Set the appointment. Yeah, we can talk later this evening. Yeah, set the appointment. If you're angry, you don't talk. Mm-mm. Not out of anger. Not out of anger. If you're angry, you don't speak out of anger. That's not the time for discussion. So in the past, you may have been using the anger as your time to speak up, but that's what makes you say things that are destructive. And remember, they're written in ink. Can't take them away. Once you said it, and it's there. So don't use anger as your motivation to step up and finally speak up. I want you guys to remember that life is a negotiation. If you go into every discussion like that, you will build the skills. The skills get built over time through use. So go and have discussions, pursue peaceful confrontations with the objective of solving problems, and understand that life is a negotiation. It's better to have a little of what you want than none at all. So don't be black and white. Don't be all or nothing. Go out and negotiate to get your piece of the pie so that you can live in happiness and serenity.